Hello everyone, thank you for joining us tonight to listen to this talk about William Pearson, one of our 3 talks about the 3 Williams of the grammar school. So we had William Wordsworth's talk last week, and next week we've got William Carter Preston, so make sure you don't miss that one. But let's go ahead and get started. William Pearson came from humble beginnings. He was born in April 1767 on a farm in Whitbeck in southwest Cumbria. So the orange pin on the map there shows you where Whitbeck is in Cumbria. His family were yeoman farmers, meaning that they owned the land that they worked. And he spent his youth working on the farm with his family, and then he saved up his money so that he could attend grammar school up in Hawkshead. And the purple pin there shows where Hawkshead is. William Pearson started attending Hawkshead Grammar School at the age of 18. And this was unusual because most students had left by that age, so they'd gone off to university or gone into work. William spent 5 years at the school from 1785 to 1790. Some of this time was as a student, but the later period was actually as a school assistant. You can see in the image on the screen there, it's a kind of cropped image from the page of a book that William Pearson himself donated to the school, and it says from 1785 to 1790, student and assistant in the school. So it's a nice record of William Pearson's time in the school that he's given to the school's library, which is really nice that we can have that, and we've got that book on display at the moment. William Pearson attended the school at the same time as William Wordsworth, who was 3 years younger than Pearson. In later life, William Wordsworth recalled Pearson in the Fenwick Notes. His manners when he came to Hawkshead were as uncouth as well could be, but he had good abilities, with skill to turn them to account. And when the master of the school, to which he was usher, died, he stepped into his place and became proprietor of the establishment. He contrived to manage it with such address and so much to the taste of what is called high society and the fashionable world, that no school of the kind even till he retired was in such high request. I often used to smile at tales which reached me of the brilliant career of this quondam clown, for such in reality he was in manner and appearance before he was polished a little by attrition with gentlemen's sons trained at Hawkshead, rough and rude as many of our juveniles were. This excerpt really shows kind of how Wordsworth observed a change in Pearson from when he came to school, from being, quote, uncouth, to then becoming a respected member of high society. At the time that William Pearson was attending Hawkshead Grammar School, the school had a great reputation for its teaching in mathematics, which had started years earlier when James Peake was the headmaster, and that was between 1766 and 1781. The school had always had strong links with Cambridge University since the school's founder, Archbishop Edwin Sandys, attended St John's College, Cambridge. During the time that James Peake was headmaster, he improved maths teaching, and specifically the teaching of geometry, as this had been introduced as a requirement for Cambridge University, very much influenced by Isaac Newton's research in the early 1700s. This emphasis on maths was really unusual for classical grammar schools back then, but it was perfect for William Pearson as that was his strength, and it might even have been the kind of particular draw that made Pearson choose Hawkshead Grammar School over other Cumbrian grammar schools. Starting school at aged 18 meant that William Pearson was older than most of the other pupils. And being older than them and something of an outsider perhaps, he may have made use of the school library and spent lots of time studying and working on his mathematical skills. Here's a photograph of the list of headmasters that's on the wall in the schoolroom at the museum. This list is original to the school. At the top right you can see James Peake is listed, and he started as headmaster in 1766 and finished his term in 1781. So that's the headmaster I just talked about, who raised the profile of the school for its mathematics teaching. William Pearson had 2 headmasters during his time at Hawkshead Grammar School. And the first was William Taylor, yet another William, who started as headmaster in 1782, and he was only at the school for 4 years until 1786, because he died of tuberculosis when he was aged 32. And so the second headmaster that William Pearson had at the school was Thomas Bowman, and he was head from 1786 to 1829, so he had a longer period as the headmaster. Bowman was actually quite a big player in expanding the school's library as well, so he asked boys to donate books or pay a subscription to help raise funds for books to put into the library. And Pearson's donation typically was a book about mechanics and physics. It would have been during Bowman's headship that Pearson worked as an assistant at the school as well, so they worked alongside each other. Here is a typical page from Pearson's donated book, and the page is on optics and lenses. It looks very much like a GCSE physics textbook from today, apart from the people pictured are Georgian gentlemen with tricorn hats and frock coats, rather than more modern people. This page is a really nice example of how teaching some topics has gone relatively unchanged for hundreds of years. And it's also an appropriate link to Pearson and his passion for science, but also for teaching, as after he worked as assistant at Hawkshead Grammar School, William Pearson moved over to Lincoln sometime between 1790 and 1793. And in 1793, William Pearson became an undermaster at the Free Grammar School in Lincoln. In 1793 or 1794, William Pearson became curate of St Martin's in Lincoln, and around this time he married a lady called Frances Lowe, and they had a daughter who they called Frances in 1797. In Lincoln, William Pearson also started giving public lectures, which was something that he continued throughout his life, and presumably he did this to subsidise his income. It's clear that Pearson was passionate about educating people about science, and many scientists supported themselves giving public lectures, just like Pearson did. Pearson continued as a teacher throughout his life, moving to London to become a partner at a school near Fulham in 1800, and then moving to East Sheen in Surrey in 1809 to establish a bigger school there. He became headmaster at both schools, and his school in Surrey became very popular amongst those in high society, which is a phrase that was mentioned in Wordsworth's writings, which I mentioned earlier in the presentation. William Pearson wanted to build a community of people sharing research and interest in astronomy, and so in 1812 he started to try drumming up interest in forming a society, and on the 12th of January 1820 he co-founded the Astronomical Society of London with Francis Bailey. This society later became the Royal Astronomical Society in 1831, when it was given a royal charter from William IV. The founding of the Royal Astronomical Society popularised the study of the cosmos, and today the Royal Astronomical Society supports continued study and research of astronomy and associated areas of science. Back in 1800 as well, Pearson became a proprietor of the Royal Institution by paying 50 guineas, or 52-ish pounds today. The Royal Institution promotes science and encourages people to engage with science. And in 1824, William Pearson published a book called Practical Astronomy, and unfortunately our library doesn't hold this book, but it would be really great one day to see that book and see what Pearson's written about and what he's hopefully drawn diagrams of as well. So not only was William Pearson a great teacher, mathematician and astronomer, but he was also a very keen inventor. So William Pearson actually invented and designed an orrery in 1796. So an orrery is sort of a mechanical solar system model. There's an illustration of that on the slide there. It's likely that these models that he made were used for his public lectures as demonstrations. He also designed a portable clock which showed phases of the moon, and there is actually an example of an orrery invented by Pearson in the Science Museum Group's collection, so I'll put a link to that object at the end of the presentation so you can have a look at it for yourselves. So as I mentioned earlier, our library holds a book donated by William Pearson, and it's about mechanics, hydrostatics, pneumatics, optics and the use of globes. And you can see here the inscription in the front, so Hawkshead School Library, the gift of Reverend William Pearson of Whitbeck, from 1785 to 1790, student and assistant in the school. So there's that full page that you saw a part of the image of earlier. The book which Pearson donated to the school was strongly in line with his personal interests, and we know that he invented mechanical models and as an astronomer is likely to have used globes and dialing. The book is entitled Lectures on Select Subjects in Mechanics, Hydrostatics, Pneumatics and Optics, with the use of globes and the art of dialing and the calculation of the mean times of the new and full moons and eclipses, and the author's name is James Ferguson. One chapter of the book focuses on the use of celestial globes, and our museum actually has a celestial globe in the collection. It's from 1815 and it's called A Cary's New Celestial Globe, and I'll talk more about celestial globes on the next slide. The surface of the celestial globe shows different constellations and the animal or creature which people have interpreted as representing those constellations. The middle photographs on the slide show close-ups of some of these images, including the image of a man, and on his right there's part of a unicorn, and beneath him is a hare. On the photograph below this is a clear green serpent creature. It's kind of tangled, if you see on the bottom picture there. Unlike terrestrial globes, which show the Earth's surface as if one's looking down on it, a celestial globe maps the stars in the sky as if you're looking up from the inside of the globe. So it kind of takes some working out to then look down at a celestial globe whilst imagining you're being inside the core of the globe looking up at the sky, if that makes sense. You can see here on our celestial globe, the Caries globe, there's a band around the centre showing the months of the year and their corresponding signs of the zodiac. I think it would be really interesting actually to compare this 1815 globe with a more modern one and see kind of what changes have occurred in constellations that have been recorded or positions of stars. And yeah, just have a nice comparison. I think that would be really great. So hopefully we can do that one day. Whilst William Pearson was living in South Kilworth, he built observatories, and he used these to make lots and lots of observations of the sun's position at noon, and this helped him calculate the obliquity of the ecliptic. And this is linked to dialing, which is one of the topics in the book William Pearson donated to our library. At certain times of year, midday appears earlier due to the elliptical orbit of the Earth, and the Earth's tilt or obliquity to the ecliptic, as well as the wobbling of the planet as it rotates. So this is why in the past people's clocks would show a slightly different time to sundials, and sundials were a lot cheaper back then, so more people had sundials. So it was a more common way of telling the time, but midday would be changing time throughout the year. So last winter, whilst researching William Pearson for the exhibition this year, I was also carrying out a large-scale object cataloguing project. During this project, I found numerous pieces of paper and booklets with astronomical or celestial tables and calculations on them, and that includes the pictured page on the slide here. And the title of this page is The Mean New Moons in March OS with the corresponding mean anomalies of the Sun and Moon and the Sun's mean distance from the ascending node from 1700 to 1800. And as you may remember from earlier in the presentation, the book by Ferguson that Pearson donated to the school had a section called The Calculation of the Mean Times of New and Full Moons and Eclipses. So surely these pieces of paper are linked to Pearson. Unfortunately, though, there is no name or date written on these documents other than the dates listed in the columns, but some of those go into the future. We've got a document that calculates to the year 5000, so that doesn't really help us very much as to identifying when it was written. If these pages weren't written by Pearson, we can say with some confidence that the writer was influenced at least by the book that Pearson donated due to the link with the titles of the book chapter and that the pieces of paper are found. Here is another example of celestial calculations we have in our collection. This is a handwritten booklet. It's mostly written in ink. There are some pencil notes in it as well. It's sort of the size of a standard school exercise book, actually. And the title is The Annual or First Equation of the Mean to the True Syzygy. And a simple definition of syzygy, if you don't know, because I didn't, is an alignment of three or more celestial bodies. And that definition is from astrosociety.org. The calculations in the booklet go right up to the year 2500, so it goes into the future. It's quite exciting. I'm not an expert in astronomy or maths, so I am unable to verify if the calculations in here are correct or not. But if someone is confident, do get in touch or come to the museum and take a look at the booklet. We can see if we can work out how close or not the calculations have been. So here's a brief timeline overviewing the key dates that I've mentioned in this presentation to do with William Pearson. There's definitely a lot more to learn about William Pearson. I'm always discovering more now that I know about him. So if you just look him up online, you'll find a lot from the Royal Astronomical Society and the Society for the History of Astronomy. There's lots of other websites as well with information about William Pearson on there. If you're ever in the Leicestershire area, I suggest that you go pay a visit to the green plaque which was presented for William Pearson in January 2020. That's in South Kilworth, so make sure you go and see that. Here's a list of references and some links as well. So I've mentioned earlier in the presentation the orrery. That's the link at the very bottom of the page, the Science Museum orrery. So you can see a photograph of that model of the solar system. There's also some other links and articles that people might be interested if they want to learn more about William Pearson.